Today I'm bringing you a virtual coaching session on having the courage to communicate. So what I'm going to do is coach you exactly like I would coach a coaching client, although I'm going to do it in a more generic manner. And I'm going to rely on my old Remarkable for this, so I have a list of topics here. Forgive me, but when the conversation is not flowing, it's harder to know what to bring up in the conversation. But the goal is to coach you exactly in terms of what are your problems, what can you do about it, and specifically on having the courage to communicate more clearly or to just communicate in a better manner. So I would like to start the session just by asking what brings you here today, right? Is it because you want to have clear value propositions or communicate more clearly, but you don't give yourself the permission to do it? Is it because you're too timid and you don't have the courage to actually communicate? Is it because you're overrun with fear and anxiety and you don't know what to do? So ask yourself, what is bringing you here today, right? What is it that you want to improve? And not only that, but you also need to ask yourself, what is already going well, right? Because sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit, or sometimes we don't recognize our achievements, but it's important to know, hey, what is going wrong here and what is already going well in a way. And this is important, right? Because if you don't define exactly what it is that you want to improve, it's going to be very hard to know how to improve it at the end of the day, right? If you don't define it, then you can't improve it. And I also have a couple of topics that I want to bring up in this session just to raise these topics and to get you thinking about those. Because in a lot of cases in a coaching session, you don't get clear answers. It may be the case where you're just raising more questions, but you're raising quality questions that are going to guide how you act in your everyday life and in your future, right? So this session is about having the courage to communicate. So the first topic that I want to bring up is understanding fear and resistance. Because here's the thing, it may be the case that you are resisting something. And you want to ask yourself that, right? If you're going to do a public speech, is your whole body resisting that emotion? Or if you're going to have a one-on-one tough conversation, is your whole body resisting and you can just feel that you don't want to do it? It's important to understand that in a lot of different cases, in a lot of different situations, what you resist persists, right? This is a saying in mindfulness. When you resist something, it just stays more and more present in your mind. And ironically, when you accept it, it just gets out of your mind and you kind of give yourself permission to release it once and for all. So it's important to know, hey, where is that resistance coming from? Where is that fear coming from? In many cases, fear can come from many different places, right? It may be that you have a childhood experience that affected you. It may be that on the first day of work, you gave a speech and it was not well received at all. So there may be a couple of triggers or a couple of situations that cause a certain trauma, and because of that you have fear. But it's really important to know that fear is not always obvious and it's not always logical. In many cases, it's not at all, right? So we may have fears due to a completely irrational reason. So what you want to do is you want to figure out, hey, why is it that I'm resisting this specific type of speech or presentation or sale or whatever type of communication? And you want to think, is it reasonable? You want to raise the question, is it possible that this fear is completely unreasonable and that I should not have this fear at all? Because that's a very important question to ask. In certain cases, we just assume that our resistance is automatic or that we have a reason to feel a certain fear and so on. But in many cases, it's not rational at all. And the sooner that you can realize that it's just a fake fear masquerading as a real fear, the sooner that you will accept things and that resistance goes away, okay? Because in a lot of cases, resistance is just resistance itself. It doesn't have a reason. If you are resisting something and you're really thinking, I don't want to do this at all costs, then you're going to be fighting every step of the way and you're not going to get good results. But if you just accept it and you think, you know what? I may not like this, but I accept that I'm going to do it, then everything just flows because you accept it and you're not resisting it, right? These seem like very basic concepts, but they're very important ones. So you want to ask yourself, are there specific situations that I'm resisting? Is there a specific fear? Or is there a fear that is not even specific and it's just the general fear, which is even more unfounded than a specific fear? And is it possible that it's just a traumatic situation from my childhood or past life that is now haunting me but doesn't have a reason to, right? So that's something to consider as well at the end of the day. Then another thing that you want to do is you want to think about your negative self-talk, right? We all have an inner critic that is saying, hey, you're going to suck at this is going to be horrible. And what you want to do is you want to silence that inner critic, or you want to at least establish empathy. What I mean by this is sometimes we have negative assumptions about how something is going to go, right? You assume that something is going to be bad, that it's not going to go well, without having a reason to do it. And what you want to do is you want to understand that part of yourself and say, hey, you know what? Thank you for the empathy. Thank you for understanding that there are risks and that I'm going to face risks. But this type of thought is not useful, right? Because when those thoughts just come up, sometimes we don't even question them. We think, hey, if I think that I'm going to suck, then I'm going to suck, period. In reality, not at all. We may have a lot of different reasons for the negative self-talk, and a lot of them may not be justified at all. It may be the case that you're just feeling bad emotionally and you're about to do public speech, so you think this is going to not go well at all just because of that emotion. When in reality, you don't even have a reason for things to go badly. You're just thinking that they will, right? So it's important to recognize what is the usual type of negative self-talk that you say to yourself, and you should establish empathy with it and recognize, hey, this is a piece of myself that is worrying about me, that is worrying about the risks, but honestly, it's not necessary, and let's set it aside for now. So you have to think, how do you usually criticize yourself? What are the negative things that you usually say? It's also important to understand that you don't need to jump from negativity to pure positivity, right? Because that sounds artificial. There are certain exercises like affirmations and so on that a lot of personal development gurus promote, but affirmations sometimes feel fake, right? When you say, hey, I'm powerful, I'm amazing, etc., and you just feel so artificial. So a good solution is to take it from negative to neutral. Instead of saying this is going to go bad, you don't go to saying this is going to go well, but instead you say, well, let's see how it goes. Let's just be neutral about it, right? It's what we call suspending disbelief as well. You don't necessarily think that things are going to go bad, you're just waiting and seeing, right? It's like, hey, let's just gauge the results once this thing happens. Let's not have any assumptions, positive or negative, before the event actually occurs. So that's something to keep in mind as well, which is the type of negative self-talk that you have and the inner critic, because the inner critic doesn't always have a justification. It may be due to pure emotion, right? Sometimes you just feel bad and you just find a reason to criticize yourself or to think that something is going to go negatively and you don't even have a reason for it, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well. Then another topic is your self-esteem, right? And what I mean by your self-esteem is the following. We all have a reason to feel good, or even if we don't have a reason to feel good, there's a kind of universal value in all of us. In other words, the default should be that we have value, and the default shouldn't be that we are criticizing ourselves and we don't have any value, right? So a lot of us are thinking, if I just have this thing, if I just do this thing, then I'm going to feel well. Well, radical thought. What if you just feel well by default without needing anything for it, right? But chances are, there's also the possibility that you already have a long list of achievements or things that you are doing, and you just don't recognize yourself for them, right? Or you just don't recognize them, right? So it's important to understand that even if you have those achievements or you have reasons to give you confidence, if you are not actually acknowledging them, they may as well not be there, right? We've all had situations where we give a great speech or where things are going very well, but we don't give ourselves that acknowledgement. If you don't acknowledge that, it may even be the case where you have a great speech, for example, and you even think, oh, that wasn't me. That wasn't due to me. That was due to any other factor, but not me. So when you are in that mindset where you recognize your achievements, and you don't need to boast, right? It's just self-esteem. It's just realizing, you know what? I actually do some things well. It's a little bit of confidence, of humble confidence. And when you have that, you are going to realize those achievements. And when you don't have it, you're not going to realize them, even if you have massive achievements, right? So something to keep in mind as well is, do I have these achievements that already give me strength, but I'm just not realizing them? Because if you've done great presentations, if you're good at selling, if you're good at communicating with others, but you don't realize that, then you're not going to have the courage to communicate or to sell, despite the fact that everything is there that allows you to communicate well. But that's how the human brain works, I guess, right? So there's also that piece of self-esteem. You should assume that you have value by nature, and you also probably have achievements or things that you did well that you may just not be realizing at the end of the day. So ask yourself this, right? What are the amazing things that I've already done or great things that I may not be realizing? And you can start with small ones, right? You don't need a massive achievement like saying, hey, I was the master speaker at a Toastmasters event for like 5 years in a row. No, if you just give a good presentation, pat yourself on the back for it, right? If you just made a good sale, pat yourself on the back for it, right? Even if you communicated a message in a clear manner, but the result wasn't good, maybe because the person had a bad reaction or due to other factors that have absolutely nothing to do with you, pat yourself in the back still, right? You have all of these achievements. It's just up to you to actually realize them, right? So onwards to the next topic, right? Which I really like, which is about hypotheticals. So a lot of people talk about visualization, right? Especially in the self-development niche and personal development niche, they talk about visualizing the perfect version of yourself and so on. And it is good, but it's a little bit forceful too and artificial. When I talk about visualization, and when I think about visualization, I think about a hypothetical, which is, what if this went well? How would that go? Because you want to make that specific. When you are the perfect version of yourself, or when you give the perfect version of a speech, or the perfect version of a sales pitch, or whatever it is, it's not going to be generic. It's going to be more of you. So for example, if you're somebody who speaks with a lot of passion and you ramble a little bit, point proven, then what's going to happen is that the perfect version of you is still going to be passionate, but maybe you're not going to ramble as much, right? If you're very serious and you speak little, and you don't speak a lot, then the perfect version of you may be a speech where you say a few things, but the ones that you say are right on point, right? So the perfect version of you is not generic. You're still going to have the same strengths. It's just that your weaknesses are mitigated. So that's why I think that it's important to consider, right? What is the perfect version of yourself if this went very well, right? If you're about to give a speech, then how would this go if this went amazing? Or if you're trying a sales pitch or any other type of communication, how would this go if this went the perfect version of itself? And I always think about those hypotheticals, right? How would the perfect version be? How would the amazing version be? Because just pure visualization, just saying, hey, let me visualize how this would go in this perfect version, it's a little bit artificial, right? So instead, I just think about the hypothetical because the hypothetical may be real. So you want to ask yourself these questions, right? How would the perfect version of this communication go, right? What would be the perfect version of this presentation? What would be the perfect version of this sales pitch, of this corporate presentation, whatever your communication situation is? Because if you talk about the hypothetical, it may actually be real, right? It's not in the future. It's not something that's very distant. It's something that, if all the pieces align, may very well just happen right here and now, right? So think about the hypotheticals and visualize in that manner. Think, what is the perfect version of myself? And how can I make it happen? And then that's the second piece of it, which is, if you think about it, do you really need a lot of things that you're missing in order to achieve that perfect version of yourself? Chances are not, right? So for example, if you think, hey, what if I give a perfect presentation in terms of, for example, a keynote speech, right? You think, what qualities would I need or what traits? Well, you would probably need to be queer. You would need to have good body language, maybe dress well. And if you think about it, are you really missing a lot of things? Probably not, right? It's probably all 90% mindset, and it's just you giving yourself permission to be that amazing person. So at the end of the day, it may be the case where you're actually not missing a lot of things and you're already there. So these hypotheticals are good because they get you thinking, hey, what if I were the perfect version of myself? And what do I really need in order to be the perfect version of myself? Because chances are you probably already have everything that you need. You just want to bring yourself to actually do it at the end of the day, right? So next topic, which is related to this one, right? Giving yourself permission. At the end of the day, we can all be great communicators. We can do amazing things, sell well, communicate well, negotiate like a pro, and all of that. But usually we don't do it because we don't give ourselves the mental permission to do it. What I mean by this is, you may be stifled or you may be feeling held back due to your own mindset. You think, hey, I could give an amazing presentation, but maybe I'm not going to do it, or maybe I don't believe that I'm going to do it. And the question is, why? You probably have everything that you need. You just haven't unlocked, you haven't checked that checkbox in your mind that gives you that permission to communicate in that manner. And what happens is a lot of people associate permission with some sort of ritual. Some people, for example, need to buy an expensive coaching program or an expensive product. I've had that myself, right? When I was trying to learn how to communicate or do other things, just the fact that I was paying for an expensive product, it gave me permission in my mind to actually do it. Because I thought, hey, now that I'm paying a ridiculous amount of money for this program, now I have permission to be excellent at something. In reality, you don't need any of that. You just need to actually give yourself permission. But some people work like that. You need to actually give yourself that permission either through a big purchase, or through an event, or maybe something happened in your life, and so on. It's similar to a maturation ritual, right? That you have in many cultures where you go through a ritual, and after you go through that ritual, now you are an adult. And now you can give yourself permission to really do something with the maximum potential, because now you know that you have been through that ritual. So that's something to take into account, which is, what do you need? Let's just let the ambulance pass by for a second. Okay, so what do you need in order to give yourself permission to actually do something, to be a great communicator, to be a great salesperson, whatever is your communication use case. Because chances are you just need to give yourself that permission in order to be great at something. And it can be about buying an expensive program, going through a specific ritual, or it can be about just deciding right here and right now that you're going to be excellent at it. You have to do whatever it is that unlocks that permission in your mind for you to be the best version of yourself, if you will. This sounds a little bit vague and intangible, but you know exactly what I mean. Okay. So next topic is setting expectations and walking the hard path. What I mean by this is the following. When you are trying to become a great communicator, chances are it's not going to happen overnight, right? And here's the thing, even if it did happen overnight, you would not deserve it because you haven't been, through all of the events and the hard road and everything that it entails. So what happens here is you need to make that decision that if you are starting, for example, you are going to need to go from being very bad to being mediocre, good, very good, excellent. You are going to need to go through all of these stages, knowing that you kind of suck along the way, enduring it and continuing onwards. And one thing that happens in terms of perception, and this happens very frequently, which is when you are outside the given area, you think that you go from 0 to 100, but when you are within that area, you notice that gains are very, very small and through time. For example, if you've never exercised in your life and you're looking at the gym bros and you think, hey, these guys just go to the gym a couple of times and then immediately they become, very, very big, like bouncers, swole. But what happens is if you're actually at the gym, you know that in order for each of your muscles to grow just a little bit, you have to put in the effort day after day, week after week. Same with communication, same with becoming great at any skill at all. Same with musicians, right? If you don't have any practice as a musician, you look at a musician and you think, oh, this person probably went from 0 to 100, right? They went from having nothing to just training and then they became amazing, right? If you've actually practiced music, you know that you go from, having dominion of certain topics and then becoming better at either composition or rhythm or whatever it is, and then you slowly climb uphill until you get to those results. Same exact thing with communication, right? You have to know that it's not going to be an overnight process. When you are outside of it, if you're beginning, if you're a newbie, you're going to think that you go from, nothing to absolute expert. But what you need to realize is that once you start doing it, you realize that every 1% or 10% that you gain is going to be through painstaking effort. So you have to walk the hard path and you have to endure it and know that you are going to suck along the way until you get to an amazing position of being an expert, right? And again, that's how it should be, because if it were easy, anybody would do it and you wouldn't deserve the title anyway. If you could just snap your fingers and artificially become excellent at communication, you probably would not enjoy it because you thought, hey, I didn't put in the effort. I don't have the war stories, I don't have the experiences, I don't have the misfires and the errors that people did. At the end of the day, I just became artificially like this, right? So you have to make that conscious decision. So you want to ask yourself, right? Are you making that effort? Are you on that path? And if not, then what can you do to keep being at it, to keep consistent, and to keep improving? So the next topic is talking about your flaws and vulnerabilities, right? This is something which comes up a lot as well, which is you want to not be defensive about anything at the end of the day. Because if you have flaws, or if you have any sort of vulnerability or things about you that are wrong, nothing is objectively wrong, or some things are objectively wrong, but at the end of the day, flaws are subjective. And everything that is a defect is also a quality, right? Because we just have traits. And traits will have a bad side and a good side. Nothing is just a flaw, right? If you think, for example, I'm too aggressive and because of that, I'm not good and I'll never be good, right? Being aggressive has both a bad side and a good side. Every single trait has a positive side and a negative one. So what you want to do is you want to realize that you shouldn't be defensive about anything. You should embrace your flaws and dive deep and really face them so that you are not defensive about any of these, right? For example, in my own life, I was obese when I was a kid. I've had breathing problems my whole life. I embrace it completely, right? If somebody comes up to me and they say, hey, you're a speaker, but you don't breathe very well, I said, that's fine. I'm still good at what I do, despite that flaw, right? Good relatively, right? You never want to say that you're great or you never want to say that you're good, but you do what you can with what you have. But at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to not be defensive about any flaw, right? At the end of the day, if somebody tries to attack you or put you on the defensive, they can't, because you know who you are better than they think that you know who you are better than who they think that you are. And because of that, they're never going to affect you, because you are completely aware of your flaws and your vulnerabilities and you use them for you instead of using them against you, right? So you want to be very aware of the flaws that you have, but not let them stop you, right? So you want to ask yourself, hey, what are the flaws that I have? Am I letting them hold myself back? Are they even flaws in the first place, right? Or is it possible that it's just my perception and there's just traits that have a bad side and a positive side, and maybe I'm making a very big deal out of all of this, right? So those are some of the things that you want to ask yourself at the end of the day, right? The next topic is body language and relaxation. In order to be confident at communication, you have to be relaxed, right? Which is, at the end of the day, you have to not have any major thing that is affecting you or that is stopping you. And this can be at the level of your actual bodily relaxation, it can be at the level of your mindset, or any other thing. At the end of the day, the principle that you should have is that you should do whatever it takes for you to feel relaxed. It may be about listening to some music, speaking with a loved one, or whatever it is, having a lucky item like a lucky pen or a lucky shirt. But what happens is, with a lot of people, when they are not relaxed, they think, this is it. Hey, I'm not relaxed, it's game over. What you want to do is you want to actively use things to help make you more relaxed. It may be about doing more exercise, sleeping better, changing some habits such as your nutrition, or it may be about measures in the moment, such as, for example, doing stretches or whatever it is, listening to that playlist with songs or whatever it is to make you more relaxed. But at the end of the day, you can't consider that not being relaxed is kind of a conviction and you can't overturn it. What you got to think about is that you have to think that if you're not relaxed yet, then you have to give yourself permission to do whatever it takes in order for you to feel relaxed so that then you can present well, right? So you have to be resourceful and you have to think, I'm going to do whatever it takes so that I give myself permission to feel relaxed at the end of the day. Because relaxation is important, right? It may be unfair, but if people sense that you're not relaxed, they're going to have certain judgments about you. And if they feel that you are relaxed, then they're going to think that you're a great speaker, even if you aren't, right? So relaxation is very, very important. Whatever it is that you can do to increase your comfort, be it in terms of clothing, physical measures, mindset measures, things that you like, whatever it is, increase your relaxation, and that will increase the confidence that you have in your communication. Not directly, but because it makes you more relaxed, it becomes easier for you to communicate as well. So, onwards to the next topic, which is preempting hard things. What I mean by this is the following. There may be many situations where you don't communicate because you're not proactive, and you're just seeing a car crash happen in slow motion and you do nothing about it. How many times has this happened in the workplace, in personal relationships, and so on? It's very hard to have a tough conversation, so you avoid it. And now your prize is that 3 months from now, the tough conversation is going to be 10 times worse, right? Amazing prize. So what we need to do is we need to be proactive and take measures to spark those tough conversations and to actually take care of them before they become bigger issues at the end of the day, right? So this is one of the things that you have to do. And you got to ask yourself, hey, am I being proactive in my communication? Am I speaking with people when there's a tough conversation to be had? Or am I just hiding and expecting things to pass, knowing very well that they're not going to pass and they're going to become even worse? So this may not be directly tied to communication, but it is also tied to communication because it's tied to clarity. The clearer that your communication is, the better the communication is, because you know exactly what you're asking, you know exactly what you're proposing, you know exactly who you're speaking to, and so on. And being proactive is a big part of it, because if you don't know what you're going to do about it, then chances are you don't even know what you're going to say, and vice versa. The more that you know what you're going to say, and the more that you know what you want, the more that you are going to take care of things when they don't match what you want at the end of the day. Then, another important topic is moving on from past failures. And by the way, I noticed that a lot of these topics are not necessarily correlated or they're not sequential. Again, it's because, you know, with the generic coaching session, you don't have that sequence of events where you usually go from what's the problem, what's the underlying emotion, what are the experiences, and so on. Here I'm just trying to, you know, throw topics at the wall that are frequently spoken about, and some are going to resonate with some people, some are going to resonate with others, right? But in this case, I want to talk about moving on from negative things. And you may ask, why is this important? Well, this is important because at the end of the day, we may have experiences which are negative and which limit us. But now here's the key. Are these really negative experiences, and do they really limit us? Because let's say, for example, that you give a speech on the first day of work, like maybe 10 years ago, and it still haunts you to this day. Should that experience define you? Probably not. And if you think about it, was it even a negative experience? Does anybody even remember it at the end of the day? In a lot of cases, we have already changed our personality after 5 years, 10 years, and so on, but we don't allow ourselves to mentally refresh, right? Just like refreshing the page when you're browsing the internet. We haven't refreshed the image that we have of ourselves. So we're still that kid, or we're still that young person that made that mistake, and we're still living it when in reality, that was kind of like half a lifetime ago or a lifetime ago, and we're not that person anymore. So what you need to do is you need to have the courage to move on from those failures, because those failures probably mean nothing about your communication. And you know what? Even if those failures meant something, just use them as a spark to get that fire and improve. That's it. There's no way to see a failure in a negative manner, right? Because first, most people don't remember failures. Second, it was probably a long time ago. And third, even if it wasn't, then it gives you the motivation for it to never happen again. As simple as that. So in a lot of cases, you want to ask yourself, hey, are there failures in my past which are limiting me? Or things that I see as failures, but they're not maybe failures at all, that I'm allowing to hold me back, right? So you want to do that analysis, that catalog, and think, hey, how can I overcome these? Or how can I realize that I have already overcome them and allow myself to move on from those failures, right? Or from those bad experiences, which may not be bad experiences at all. In other words, a lot of the things from your past that you think that are going to be negative or that are holding you back, in reality, they may not be negative and they're definitely not holding you back. It's probably the image that you still have of them to this day, or the fear that is holding you back. And just like what we spoke about with fear, it's probably an irrational fear and you just have to tackle it and move on. In this case, it's literally just about giving yourself permission to move on and to not see yourself as that older version of you that made that mistake. So onwards to the next topic, which is self-compassion and acceptance, right? And this may seem very vague and very, woo-woo and mindful and so on, but bear with me for a moment. So with self-compassion, what you want to do here is you want to accept how things are. There are situations where you are going to be bad at something, and you are going to be bad at something for a long amount of time before you become good at it, if you ever become good. But that's fine, because you want to accept yourself in the current state as you are. There's a lot of people that place conditions upon accepting themselves. So for example, they say, hey, if I just do a great speech, then I'll consider myself a great speaker, right? Or if I just make a great sales pitch, I'm going to consider myself a great communicator, and so on. But the problem with conditions is that conditions change, and then you become addicted to expecting the next condition before allowing yourself to give yourself value. What I mean by this is, if you say, hey, I'm not a great speaker yet, but once I do a great speech, I'm going to be a great speaker. When you do that great speech, you're going to say, you know what? Not yet. When I do 2 great speeches, I'm going to be a great speaker. Then when you do the second great speech, you're going to think, well, when I do a great speech in front of a big crowd, then I'll allow myself to give myself value. And that can be considered a type of addiction, because what you're effectively saying is, hey, once I hit the next checkpoint, I'm going to allow myself to give value to myself. But it's kind of an addictive behavior, because you're addicted to expecting to reach the next checkpoint and withholding value at the same time. That itself is an addiction, right? So what you need to do is you need to realize that just as you are right now, right, with no momentum, no changes at all, how you are today, this second, this moment, is something that you can accept. You have to accept it. Because if you accept it, you are going to feel well, and you are going to evolve, and you get better while accepting yourself. But the opposite doesn't work. If you keep putting checkpoints ahead of accepting yourself, you're never going to accept yourself, because you're kind of evolving out of hate almost, right? It's like, hey, I hate myself right now, but let me just change this, and let me just achieve this, and maybe I'll accept myself later. Never happens, right? What you need to do is the opposite, right? It seems like a slower process. It's not slower, but it's going to seem slower, because you think, hey, if I already accept myself and I have everything that I need, how am I going to get that spark to do something right? Well, you don't need to, because what you want to do is you want to create it out of all the fulfillment that you already have, and without that need for hate or envy or negative emotions. You want to accept yourself as you are, and then decide to do great things because you accept yourself. And that's a better thing, because it's a better way of going about it, because you accept yourself every step of the way, right? So you want to have that self-compassion and the self-acceptance. So you want to ask yourself in this scenario, hey, am I doing everything that I can? Am I accepting myself? Am I being too harsh on myself, right? Too hard on myself? Am I judging myself for no reason? Am I placing conditions in terms of accepting myself, or do I really accept myself? And even if you are not good at something, or even if you have flaws, everybody does, right? It's about accepting yourself as you are in the current state. It doesn't mean that the current state is not going to improve, but you have to accept yourself in that current state so that you can move on with that acceptance to the next state, right? But what you can't do is withhold acceptance and keep going, right? That doesn't work. Then you want to reframe the past negative experiences that you've had. What I mean by this is, we've all had past negative experiences, right? That's for sure. or we may consider them to be negative. But here's the thing, even if they are negative, that sacrifice or that misfire or that error made you who you are today, right? We are the sum of all the experiences that we've had up to this moment, and that includes a lot of negative experiences. So it's important to understand that when you are talking about the negative experiences that you have, if you did have those experiences, at least get something out of it, right? Decide that because of this sacrifice or because of this thing that I lost or because of this thing that I didn't gain, that I'm going to put in that much more effort and now I'm going to get it done, right? So you want to reframe those negative experiences. Yes, they may have been negative experiences. As we saw before, they may not even be negative experiences. It may just be perception. But even if they are negative experiences, what you want to do is you want to ask yourself, hey, considering what I lost or considering the humiliation that I suffered or whatever it is, how can I make sure that it never happens again? Or how can I at least use it, as a way to compel myself to act and to get better at something? Or in other words, if you've sacrificed something, use it to be better at something. So you want to ask yourself those questions, right? What did I lose? What did not go well in the past? And how can I use these to become better at what I'm trying to do? In this case, communication or any other skill, honestly. Then you want to celebrate victories no matter how small they are. And the reason for this is the following. When you don't celebrate the small victories, you're being arrogant because you're thinking that you're not going to be satisfied with a small victory and that you need something big. And nothing could be further from the truth. You need to stay humble. Every small victory is a victory that merits being celebrated because it's not about the size of the victory. It's about your mindset. Whether you are celebrating, making a small sale, or having an amazing speech in front of 2,000 people or 100,000 people, the feeling that you feel inside is the same. So what you want to do is you want to cultivate that feeling of feeling satisfied with yourself, of being excited to repeat it again, of being motivated for the future. That's the feeling that you want to replicate. But the problem is, when you don't celebrate the small victories, when you think that you are above them, what's going to happen is that you're not going to have that feeling because you think it's not even worth mentioning this small experience that I have, the small victory, because, it's just not worth mentioning. Right? So what you want to do is you want to recognize those small victories every time they occur because of the feeling that they cultivate in you, right? So you want to ask yourself questions such as, hey, what are some victories that I have that I may not be acknowledging? Or what are some victories that I may have that I may not even have noticed, and so on. You want to cultivate that feeling of pride even of doing the right thing and having that victory due to that. Next topic is you want to find your voice, right? And we're near the end. We're in the last 3 or 4 topics now. But by finding your voice, I mean the following. As you start to communicate and as you start to sell and as you start to talk with people or talk to people, you are going to figure out that you have a very unique voice. And a lot of people reject their voice because they think, for example, hey, I'm a very sensitive person, so when I talk, I'm very empathetic and I'm very attuned to what people feel, and I feel that's weak, right? And they reject their own voice because of that. For example, what you need to realize is that you need to embrace your own voice because, as we saw, every trait is simultaneously a weakness and a strength if you know how to use it. So if you're very sensitive and very attuned to how people think, make that a strength. Figure out how you can use that as a unique selling point in your communication, how you can tailor things to different audiences, be aware of the reactions of people, and so on. Or if you say, for example, hey, my body language is very neutral, I'm not very powerful, and I don't move a lot. There is a way to use that to your advantage as well, right? Because you're neutral, you're not affected by things, and you're not hyper-reacting to everything that happens. So when you start to speak more and more, you're going to figure out that you have a voice, right? You may be summarized or you may ramble, you may be very emotional or very logical, but whatever the combination of these different dichotomies or spectrums exists in you, that's your unique voice. And you can't reject it because you can't change your voice artificially, right? You can over time suffer changes with the years as they go on, but you cannot simply snap your fingers and change the tone of your voice, right? So you are who you are, and there is strength in that because there's an audience for every voice. And if you embrace it instead of fighting it, then you are going to have a lot of results because you are going to figure out that other people want to listen to your voice and you are going to attract people who are like you. And when you reject your own voice, you are also rejecting all of the other people that think like you, that need your help, or that want to hear your message, right? So you're not just rejecting yourself, you're rejecting a whole category of individuals that could possibly be clients or fans or audiences or whoever it is, right? So when you start to cultivate your voice, you're going to figure out that maybe it's very unique, it's very unique, it's very weird, it has a very unique combination of certain things. Maybe you focus on very specific details that other people don't even care about. Don't reject that. That is your voice and you want to cultivate it. A lot of the best communicators are the weirdest communicators. They're just so polished that they don't seem that weird anymore, right? And I think that one constant of life is that we're all weird, right? The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only weird thing about people is when people pretend that they're not. The only people who are weird are the ones that pretend that they are not weird in the first place, if that makes sense, right? So what you want to do here is you want to find a unique voice. So you want to ask yourself, right, is there any situation where you're rejecting your unique voice, where you're kind of rejecting your idiosyncrasies and your unique details and your quirks, and what can you do to correct that and to embrace your voice and to realize that it is valuable and that it is going to attract the people like you who need to hear a message, right? So that's something to think about as well. The next topic is that certain things are already perfect and you want to see what they are. At the end of the day, what happens here is you may think that there are certain things that you don't do well. Maybe you're not good at summarizing messages, maybe you're not good at body language, whatever it is. But even if it's just 1%, there's 1% of you that is already doing the right thing, and you want to recognize it. Why? Because here's the thing. You don't become better by rejecting the part of yourself that's not good. You become better by embracing the part of yourself that is already good and expanding on it, right? Let me give you an example from a completely different area. When I was a child, I was obese and I was doing everything that I could to lose weight. But I used to have an approach that was out of hate, hating my body, hating what I ate. It was very unhealthy. But then I realized that there was a small percentage of things they already did well, right? When I went to the gym, I already did the movements at the machines very well. I already ate breakfast very well. It was one of the healthiest meals. So by focusing on the things that I already did well, I started to expand upon those, right? What if I have a healthy meal in this other meal as well, right? What if I do these right movements for these other machines as well, or I learn them? So you always grow by expanding the things that you already do well, never by rejecting the things that you don't do well. In other words, you always expand out of love, you never expand out of hate. I know this sounds very cheesy, but it's true, right? I know that we're kind of getting into vague territory where it almost seems like I'm going to mention the secret where you think if you just wish for something, you're going to get it. No, but up to a certain point, when you focus on certain things, you attract more of those. So if you focus on the things that you already do well, you're going to attract more of these into your life. If you focus on the things that you hate and that you don't do well, you're going to attract more of those. That's why one of the good things is you want to catalog the things that you already do well in terms of communication or anything in life, and you want to just focus on those and ignore everything else, right? If I was a newbie in terms of communication right now, I would think, hey, what is it that I already do well? Maybe I'm great at body language. So let me just think about body language and how good it is, and let me present. That's it. And then soon there's going to be other things that you do well. There's going to be other things that you do well as well. Maybe your calls to action become better. Maybe the summarization of topics is good as well. Maybe you can tune the presentation to certain audiences. And as you start to do other things well as well, you focus on those as well. You think, hey, I do body language and I do summarization and I do calls to action very well, but let me just focus on these three. And then it starts to expand. So what you want to do is you want to catalog the things that you already do well, even if they're few, and you want to expand upon those and completely ignore the ones that you don't do well, right? So you want to ask yourself questions such as, hey, what are the things that I already do well? Is it possible that I'm not even acknowledging them because I have negative self-talk, right? How can I expand upon these, right? What would the other characteristics of my communication be if they were as good as this characteristic is? That's what you want to do at the end of the day, right? You want to expand upon the things that you already do well at the end of the day. Then you want to build resilience, right? Second to last topic. No, sorry, 3 to go. Building resilience. You need to realize in a lot of cases, it's not about the things that you do, it's about the things that you endure. There's a lot of situations where you have a message, but then people have an objection. So it's not even about how good you are at communicating your message, it's about how good you are at dealing with the objection. In a lot of cases, dealing with obstacles is a lot more important than the things that you do. Because once you deal with the obstacles, then you can do the thing that you wanted to do in the first place. So things like enduring problems during presentations, dealing with objections, dealing with questions, dealing with hesitation, and a lot of that is a lot more important than the original action that you are planning. There's a lot of industries where literally, if you just resist the different things and you weather events, you find your way to success, right? I've been in the startup world for a long time, and I think that startups are a prime example of that. You don't even achieve a lot of things because of the things that you do. You just survive all of the harsh events. And if you survive all of those, you're going to get a break sooner or later. Or certain professions, right? I've never been an actor or musician or others, but I think that if you just weather the events and you keep in there until you get your break, then you become famous, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about surviving negative things. And if you survive enough negative things, then you're going to have positive things presented as well. And then you can capitalize on those. Same exact thing with communication, right? You can have an amazing message, but it's not even about the amazing message anymore. It's about surviving objections. It's about surviving mishaps, technical problems, and so on. If you can survive all of those, then there's going to be an opportunity for you to just present your message, right? So it's about having resilience, and it's about what you survive more than what you actually do. right? So think about resilience, right? What are some ways in which you can become more resilient, in which you can literally take a punch to the face, metaphorical one, and survive harsh objections, people criticizing you, people saying this is not who you are, and etc. And how can you still keep going so that you can deliver your message, right? Next topic, you want to cultivate temperance. At the end of the day, it's very easy for us to lose our minds or for us to become emotional over something. So what you want to do is you want to be very calm about something. If you have a technical problem in a presentation, it's not the end of the world. If you make a mistake in a presentation, it's not the end of the world. If you make an error in a pitch, it's not the end of the world. But what you need to do is you need to be very calm about it. It's very easy, especially in the world of nowadays where social media is pretty much polarizing everyone and everybody's just trying to get shock value, it's very easy to become polarized. So what you want to do is never lose your cool. You want to be able to contemplate all of the options, even if something negative happens, and to look at them and to think, hey, what can be done here, right? My mic just had a problem and now there's no sound. What can I do? Can I continue just with the slides? Can I borrow somebody else's microphone? Can I do gestures? How can I continue this presentation? Or you're making a sales pitch, the lights go out in the building, right? Can you just turn on the cell phone's flashlight and continue doing the pitch, right? Is there urgency? Is there any way that you can consider is there any way that you can continue what you were doing without a care in the world, right? So it's about continuing. And it's about not letting things get to you, not being emotional, because there's a lot of crazy people, there's a lot of unhinged people, and they do not need you to contribute to their numbers, right? What you want to do is always keep your cool. Even when you are contemplating extreme measures, such as, for example, you may need to abandon a presentation or cancel something, you can contemplate those measures, but you want to think it through. You never want to take an action out of, just out of emotion or do it in a very rushed manner, because that never ends well. So what you want to do here is you want to ask yourself, for example, hey, how can I be more calm in these situations? How can I keep my cool? How can I contemplate the different options in these different scenarios? Can I rehearse and do role play of different situations so that I become better prepared, and so on, right? You want to always keep your cool at the end of the day. And then finally, last topic to close this virtual coaching session is you want to have the courage to fix the problem for people. What happens is when you're communicating a message, it can be a good message in general, in a generic manner. But going from good to great communicator, you tailor that message to a specific audience. And the way that you do it is by thinking, what is the thing that these people want and how can I give it to them, right? A good communicator doesn't just deliver a presentation and say, I'm done. No, they actively think, what does this specific person want and how can I connect my message to their benefits? This may sound obvious to people that come, for example, from sales, where you're thinking, hey, it's just analyzing the needs of the person, converting the features to the benefits, and then selling the benefits to the person. Yes, but in everyday life, when you're communicating, you may not even think about that, right? You're, for example, doing a presentation for 20 executives, and you think that they all want the same thing, so you give the same presentation. But no, can you think about what every single one of these people wants in specific, and then maybe say a small addendum or epilogue or coda to each one of them, saying how each one of them benefits individually, because people want you to pay attention to them and to pamper them a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to consider, hey, how can I make this customized to this person? And why do I say have the courage to fix it for them? Because it takes courage, right? The way that you customize a message is by going into the person's head, thinking what it is that they want, and then guessing as much as you can, an educated guess, in trying to fix the issue for them. And sometimes you are going to fail miserably, but that's part of life. But it takes courage, because you have to get out of your own headspace and go into their life, their problems, their mind, and think, what is it that you want? And let me try and find the solution for that thing and sell it to you. This is a pure sales tip in a way, but it doesn't make it any less valuable because of that. So you want to ask yourself, hey, besides just communicating, am I having the courage to go into the person's mind and to think what it is that they want and to give it to them? Am I having the courage to customize something for an audience and to tell it to that specific audience, right? Am I having the courage to say whatever it is that I want to say for the specific needs of that specific person? Am I even making the effort to know what those needs are, right? So those are some things to keep in mind in this virtual coaching session, right? Which we're closing now. At the end of the day, it's all about having the courage to communicate, right? So it's about thinking, hey, what is it that I want to say to people and how is it that I can say that thing to people? It's about facing fears. It's about increasing the competency of your communication. It's about being resilient. It's about a lot of different things, tackling your fears, accepting your demons and a lot of other things. But what you want to do at the end of the day, right, is you want to have that courage. You want to think, what are the things that are holding me back? How can I smash through them? And how can I just keep going, right? In a lot of cases, you don't even need a lot of courage. You just need a courage to take the next step and to keep going. Let me become a little bit better at this, right? Let me not be stopped by this specific obstacle. And as that changes, compound over time, you're going to become better and better because you stick in there and you progress through the different levels of skill, right? So I hope this virtual coaching session was useful. I know it's not the same experience as being in the room with one specific person, but what I wanted to do is take the general topics that I explore with a lot of different clients and just think, hey, some of these are probably going to resonate with you, maybe others are not, but at the end of the day, you probably got some value out of at least some of these points. Thanks for watching.